Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and today we are covering the infamous Boys on the Track case. This case has been much requested to be covered on MINDSHOCK for a full, logical, comprehensive analysis of what went on in this perplexing case that is layered in conspiracy and cover-up in all directions. From Barry Seal to the Clinton crime family to many other allegations and overlapping conspiracies and cover-ups. Also, quite a few other unsolved murders in the area around the time that nobody really talks about as much. And why have they been overlooked and swept under the rug? These are the important questions here, and of course we'll be covering them in typical MINDSHOCK fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies, like pretty much everything out there in the mainstream true crime and otherwise. If you want to help support the channel, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. If they're still not coming through, make sure to like and comment on more videos. That's how the YouTube algorithm works, based on engagement. You can also check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. Leave them in the comment section, unless, of course, you are live with us right now, in which case feel free to drop any comments or questions in the live chat. You can also support us by becoming a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Okay, so full disclosure, this will be a blind analysis by yours truly, Bruce McGuire. Now, I've heard of quite a few cases. I've heard this case name dropped, but I have actually not really seen any media coverage of it. Make of that what you will. It is definitely not one of these super popular cases like the JonBenet Ramsey case. I mean, the O.J. Simpson case, whatever, but should it be? Should it be? And is there a reason why it isn't? Is there a very, very good reason why this is not one of the most popular cases when perhaps it should be, based on how much is overlapped here? I know coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists, the Dunning-Kruger crowd, I know they love this case as well for being able to write off everything as coincidence, particularly the Billy Clinton connections. Alleged connections, of course. So, let's go through a brief overview here. This is from encyclopediaofarkansas.net. The Boys on the Tracks. Mara Leverett's 1999 book, Boys on the Tracks: Death, Denial, and a Mother's Crusade to Bring Her Son's Killers to Justice, is one of the most important examples of investigative journalism in modern Arkansas history. The book's subject is one of the state's most famous unsolved cases. At the heart of the case are events surrounding the deaths of two young men, best friends Larry Kevin Ives and Donald George Don Henry, both of Bryant, Saline County. and the resistance encountered by the grieving parents as they searched for the truth. The book won the prestigious Booker-Worthen Literary Prize in 2000. August 23rd, 87, around 4 a.m., the bodies of two young men were spotted by the crew of a Union Pacific locomotive near Crooked Creek, Trestle, in Alexander, Pulaski, and Saline counties. The bodies were lying between the tracks, wrapped in a pale green tarp. There was a gun nearby. The train was unable to avoid running over the bodies. The state medical examiner, Dr. Fahmy Malak, and this individual, for those that are well versed in the case, has made very questionable rulings throughout his entire career. And this one is no different. This is actually one of the reasons the case gained the notoriety that it did. Because this goof originally ruled that the deaths of Kevin Ives, age 17, and Don Henry, 16, quote, two accidental deaths due to THC intoxication, end quote. THC is a component of marijuana. However, the parents disputed this and began to conduct their own investigations. Experts hired by the parents disagreed strongly with Malak's findings. And on February 26, 88, 5 days after a hearing, the boys' deaths were changed from accidental to undetermined. Later that year, a grand jury ruled their deaths a probable homicide. And NBC's hit show Unsolved Mysteries featured a segment on the case in the fall of '88, including allegations that the boys had been murdered due to witnessing something regarding drugs. Now, a lot of coincidence theorists, they hallucinate that this is just an impossibility in most cases, because one of the most prominent theories in any unsolved case is that the victims witnessed something they shouldn't have. Now, obviously, nobody's saying to believe that, but to discount that as a theory is quite silly with all of these known cases. I'm not saying this is one of them, but all of the known cases where people stumbled upon seeing something they shouldn't have seen, so to speak. Rumors continued to circulate around the case, especially following the deaths of certain people who were supposed to testify before the grand jury. I mean, I'm sure that's all coincidental. I mean, Arkansas is just one of these highly populated states. I mean, it's like a New York or a California or a Florida where people are always dying, so it's just not suspicious that all these people died before being able to testify, the coincidence theorists, I suppose, would say. In '94, the Clinton Chronicles, a propaganda video purporting to connect the one and only Billy Clinton of the Clinton crime family to this case as well. The deaths of Ives and Henry were among those to which Bill Clinton was supposedly connected. The Clinton Chronicles advanced the conspiracy theory that while governor of Arkansas, Clinton had a connection to a scandal involving large shipments of cocaine, guns, and money from Central America passing through Arkansas at the Mena Intermountain Municipal Airport. It further speculated that the two boys had been murdered after stumbling upon a shipment moving through Saline County. Now, for those not familiar with the saga of Barry Seal, one such individual involved in all of this drug smuggling from Central America, I mean, see, it's weird. See, back in the day when a lot of goofs, like the average masses, they kind of believed what was on the idiot box. But now, I mean, especially post Epstein, I mean, even the most gullible of goof bootleggers who believe everything they see on the idiot box regarding news reports, etc. I mean, now that all this information is known, how outlandish is this theory? I mean, I'm not sure, because even if these boys stumbled upon some kind of shipment, would they by default have known what it was? And if there was political cover, so to speak, were they really worried about two boys saying, oh, we saw some guys moving some crates or something of that nature? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, witnesses to illicit activity have been murdered throughout history. I mean, to discount that's quite silly, but is that exactly what happened here? I think there's a missing variable, as there always seems to be in a lot of these unsolved cases. But to completely hallucinate that it's a definitive possibility that none of these conspiracies are true, obviously quite silly. I mean, even the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, the general tone here is dismissive of so called conspiracy theories, even though the track record of these conspiracy theories versus mainstream narratives is, I mean, it's a complete blowout on the scorecard. I mean, the CIA trafficking of drugs has been well known for quite some time now. See, in 88, see, was it 89 that it became known? 89, 90? So, what level of known? So, I don't know if it was published in newspapers, but there were articles dating back to 1985 regarding. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like it was completely unheard of at the time, but would the average bootlicker know about it back then? It further speculated. Okay, so further speculated that two boys have been murdered after stumbling upon a shipment moving through Saline County. Lawyer Dan Harmon. Now here, I mean, this case just has so many layers. I mean, I guess that's why one of the reasons it's unsolved of at the moment, officially unsolved. But the case has so many twists and turns here, so many connections to cover up and conspiracy. So Dan Harmon here, lawyer Dan Harmon, who had represented Ives and Henry's parents, was convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, and drug possession with intent to distribute in 1997. Leverett writes in her book that his conviction and the resulting 11-year prison sentence handed down in 98 proved, to the boys' parents at least, that their boys' deaths had occurred in an environment of local corruption. Despite the exhaustive amount of info that Leverett provides in her book, she offers no conclusions regarding the case. She instead presents the story mostly through the eyes of Linda Ives, detailing the resistance she has met in her struggle. Also, I mean, there's a little bit of reminiscence here of the Johnny Gosch case and Noreen Gosch's quest for justice in an environment of just absolute corruption, cesspool of corruption in Des Moines and elsewhere. In the chat here, we have Jess Palmer, Flat Bob, Ross Dog's Broken Spirit says Reddit won't dare dive deep into this case since it involves their golden boy, Clinton. Well, there is some discussion on Reddit regarding this case. I will be going through it. Something else is here says, howdy Mindshockers. I remember this case from Mena, Arkansas. Are you from Arkansas? Ross Dog's Broken Spirit says, if you're a Clinton supporter, don't even in the chat. Well, we welcome the Dunning-Kruger crowd here. I mean, is there anybody who's a Clinton supporter who isn't suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect? Does the Clinton crime family actually have supporters in 2024? Do they? That'd be a little bit surprising. I don't know. Alright, let's go through the wiki here. 4 a.m., August 23rd, 87, the bodies of 16-year-old Don Henry, 17-year-old Kevin Ives were hit by a freight train in the town of Alexander, Arkansas. They were lying on the tracks. The locomotive engineer engaged the brakes while blowing the horn, but the train could not stop in time and rolled over the bodies. A second autopsy revealed that Don Henry had been stabbed in the back, and Kevin Ives' skull may have been crushed prior to being run over. I mean, So, okay, if they stumbled over a drug shipment, what are the logistics? Were people moving crates or something of that nature? And there were possibly guards that came up behind them? The deaths were initially ruled an accident, the result of the boys in deep sleep on the tracks while incapacitated due to high amounts of THC allegedly present in their blood. The parents of the boys insisted on a second autopsy, and after exhumation it was ruled that homicide was likely. Later, another pathologist ruled that Don Henry's shirt showed evidence of a stab wound. And, just the goofery present by coincidence theorists in hallucinating that medical examiners can't be corrupt or incompetent. I mean, how many first autopsies were proven, just in many cases, even without corruption, just based on sheer incompetence? Because obviously the cult of authority worship dictates that if somebody's wearing a lab coat or if there's some kind of professional with some kind of a degree from some kind of prestigious indoctrination facility, that must mean they can't make mistakes or take payoffs. I mean, that's the mind of a coincidence theorist. Welcome, Carol, in the chat here. Background, 4 a.m., August 23rd, 87, the crew on board a 75-car, 6,000-ton Union Pacific freight train, more than a mile long and traveling at a rate of more than 50 miles per hour, en route to Little Rock, Arkansas, spotted two boys lying motionless across the tracks about 300 feet ahead. Here's the other thing, too. I mean, this just occurred to me. How many people, either via marijuana, alcohol, or otherwise, just take naps on the tracks? It's actually quite a bit. Now, So apparently they're, I'm trying to find stats specifically on non-passengers. So it looks like there's at least a few hundred a year. Railroad deaths totaled 954 in 2022. So it looks like 10 were employees. I don't know if on-duty employees. 29 were non-trespassers, but not passengers. So I'm assuming that's maybe people in cars at malfunctioned intersections. It doesn't say here. This is the Federal Railroad Administration report. It also does not include intentional incidents such as suicide. So, okay, so we don't have those numbers. So, non-suicide trespassers. So these are people just hanging out on train tracks. And how did they determine they were non-suicidal? So 651 non-trespasser, or 651 trespasser deaths, 29 non-trespassers, 10 employees, and 7 passengers. So this would include passengers falling off the train or even assaults by other passengers. So yeah, I mean this is kind of a lot, but it also, this does not include suicide. So I don't know how they determine, how do they differentiate a trespasser from a suicidal individual? So 651 trespasser deaths. Huh. I'll put up the stats right here on the screen so everybody can see the breakdown here. Huh. The Volpe National Transportation System Center says hundreds of people lose their lives every year on train tracks due to trespassing or suicide. Washington Post had an article, this is way back in 2018. The article was published. More than 300 times last year, people walked onto railroad tracks to intentionally put themselves in the path of a train. Huh? Now, how many of them were lying down asleep, though? Not that, I mean, I'm just curious. So there are 100, so as of 2018 here, 137,465 miles of freight railroad lines. Over 1,000 injuries, several hundred deaths. So not incredibly rare, but I guess they're not really classified in terms of how many were lying down or, imbibed drugs of some kind and then lied down on the track. Yeah, Miranda in the chat says I wouldn't have thought that many. Yeah, it's a little bit higher than I thought as well. I wonder if I could find the 1980s statistics. So they have list of rail accidents, but that's about it. So, okay, I found some stats from the Netherlands. Some strange statistics here. Seems like other countries have much more stats on this. Okay. Wow, yeah, there's quite a bit of stats from other countries. UK has a lot of these stats as well. Yeah, I'm actually like some of these Netherlands stats and Japanese stats. There's a lot of stats I do not see a lot. The United States here. It's quite curious. Suicide versus non-suicide. Oh, here we go. Fox News had some interesting stats here by train strikes. Just give me a second, I'll put them on the screen. This is from the Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration. They even have them broken down by state, but not... Arkansas is not on here. They do not have a link to the source here. But they do have actually more in-depth stats than I thought. They even have indictments. So, here are the fatal strikes by state here, separated between suicide and non-suicide. So this was published 2020. And this actually had to be requested by a Freedom of Information Act. Interesting. So between 2012 and 2017, 3,687 lives were lost. 1,332 were officially deemed to be suicides. 2,355 were non-suicides. California, New York, Florida, and Texas consistently had the highest number of trespasser strikes. So they said I guess these are not public stats. They had to be requested by a Freedom of Information Act that Fox News did. And they even have it broken down by age. Or what is this? Percent of indictments? Is this... And they have it here. Suicide, non-suicide. And then they also have, believe it or not, like this was what I was looking for. They do have position relative to the indictment. So I'm assuming they had to have survived to get indicted. Oh wait, incidents, not indictments, my bad. So this is the incidents. Okay. I was wondering why they would keep track of the indictments, but okay. Lying down, walking or stepping onto the tracks, and standing. So red was suicide. So they actually, over 30% were lying down. Interesting. This is actually interesting. And so the least would be the sitting position for both non-suicide. So, wait a second. So they were just sitting, what, eating their lunch on the train tracks when they got hit, and it was non-suicidal? I wonder how they determined it to be non-suicide. Non-suicide's in the blue, suicide's in the red. Unfortunately, they do not have the Arkansas statistics here. Oh wow, that's really sad. Something else is here. Said, I actually had a friend years ago that chose train tracks as his life exit. Very sad. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought it was that popular. I mean, obviously jumping off a bridge, quite popular. Carol says, I've always believed that the boys on the tracks and the Delphi case had similarities. I believe the Illuminati ritual to be thrown from the Freedom Train or be deleted is symbolism in both. Yeah, we didn't get to that angle yet. That is an interesting angle. A specific Illuminati ritual here. Alright, well let's get back to this here. So not the rarest. So even lying down quite high percentage. It does make sense that walking or stepping would be the highest non-suicide, but because if it was accidental, but non-suicidal just sitting on the tracks and being struck. Actually, I don't know. Maybe if the person was deaf and facing the opposite direction, if they could determine that. Pardon the black helicopters in the background. They might not like this podcast. Okay. Let's continue here. So the people on the train, so they're going more than 50 miles an hour. They spotted the two boys lying motionless across the tracks 300 feet ahead. Members of the locomotive crew also stated that the bodies were partly covered by a green tarp, though police disputed the existence of any such tarp, and none was ever recovered from the scene. That's another interesting wrinkle in the case. Huh. That's weird. Did somebody remove the green tarp because it had evidence on it? Nearby was a .22 cal rifle and a flashlight. The boys did not move despite the sound and vibration of the approaching train, its emergency brakes, and its air horn. More than 1,000 feet of the decelerating train crossed the point where the bodies lay before it came to a stop. The train's crew reported the incident to railroad and law enforcement authorities. By 4:40 a.m., police arrived on the scene. So about 40 minutes to get rid of the tarp and any other evidence. The boys had reportedly left home about midnight to go hunting. The gun and flashlight near the bodies suggested they were using a hunting technique known as spotlighting, which involves using a bright light to scan for animals whose eyes brightly reflect the light after dark. Okay, so how popular is after midnight hunting in Arkansas for 16 to 17-year-old boys? I actually don't know the answer to this question. However, it would stand to reason that that would be a time where you can stumble upon illicit activity, more so than in the middle of the day. Autopsies. The state medical examiner, Fahmy Malak, ruled the deaths as a result of marijuana intoxication, saying the boys had smoked the equivalent of 20 cigarettes and fell asleep on the tracks. The parents did not accept this finding and conducted their own investigation. March 1988, James Garriott of San Antonio offered a second opinion and was skeptical about the findings of marijuana. Isn't it weird how in a lot of these cases with corruption, the guy that's out of state that has no local connections has a completely different finding? Isn't that weird? A second autopsy by Georgia medical examiner Joseph Burton found the equivalent of 1 or 2 marijuana cigarettes, not 20. A grand jury ruled the deaths as probable homicide. When it was found that Don Henry's shirt contained evidence of a stab wound to the back and Kevin Ives' skull may have been crushed by his own rifle, the ruling was changed to definite homicide. Don Henry's father also noted that he did not believe his son would have risked his gun getting scratched by laying it on the gravel. Yeah, those details are quite important as well. Eric Graffer in the chat says, for those of you who've seen the Maddie Scott case, what do you think happened? Yeah, wow. I need to do another episode on that case as well. In so many cases, the early rumors turn out to be true. That's why I never write them off. Those are the ones that need to be investigated the most. Yeah, all series are ongoing. Investigation. Despite pressure from the victim's parents, Saline County Sheriff James H. Steed Jr. refused to investigate the case. That's kind of interesting. What does it say when the county sheriffs refuse to even investigate? I mean, even the most devout coincidence theorist and authority worshipping cultist bootlicker, what do they say when the sheriff refuses to investigate? Do they raise an eyebrow then? In February '88, Dan Harmon, the parents' attorney and Saline County prosecutor, finally reached an agreement with Steed that he would begin an investigation if the parents stopped criticizing him. What kind of 4-year-old nonsense is this? Don't talk bad about me and maybe I'll investigate. I mean, that's the kind of sheriff that needs to be dismissed immediately. However, the subsequent investigation was apparently sabotaged, and several witnesses who were to testify before a grand jury were found dead. Sheriff Steed is also said to have lied about where he sent the dead boys' clothes for examination. He sent them to Arkansas State Crime Lab and not, as intended, to the FBI. Harmon also soon lost the trust of the parents, as he is said to have prevented the case from being solved. And why would he do that? Is this simple incompetence, or were there payoffs? I mean, the cast of characters here in this case does not breed any kind of confidence that there isn't corruption. I mean, just look at this cast of goof bastards here. Like, when you have this many goof bastards, like, how is this supposed to get solved? Thanks, Eric, in the chat. Yeah, I mean, we have Pablo Escobar and also, let's not forget, Barry Seal. Just, again, when you have this many goof bastards, what is really going on here? Eric says, your vids on it have been the best I've seen on YouTube. Thank you. I try to be as comprehensive and exhaustive in each and every case, upturning every stone, examining every theory possible, positing new theories with logic and reason at the forefront. Something else is here says, Barry Seal looking like Alex Jones's uncle. Would anybody be surprised if there were familial links between Alex Jones and Barry Seal? Would that surprise anybody? It's actually kind of interesting. The University of Buffalo, right at ontology.buffalo.edu, even has a write-up on Arkansas connections and Clinton, on Billy Clinton. Yes, Eric. All live streams are also posted as videos under the playlists of true crime, or if they're under the playlist of a specific case. A lot of people don't use the search engine on YouTube, but if you go to any YouTube channel, you can search the channel itself for any videos. The FBI took over this case in 1994, but came to no conclusion, and the investigation was dropped in 1995, allegedly due to political pressure. So what does everybody think about that? So the FBI, supposedly the most competent, well-funded government agency that investigates crime, came to no conclusion, supposedly due to political pressure. What does everybody make of that? That's a tough one. So the FBI takes over the case. I mean, does anybody find this strange? And also how long it took for them to take over the case. I mean, the sheriffs refusing to investigate and crying about being criticized by the parents of dead teenagers. FBI takes over in 94, no conclusion, dropping the investigation in 1995. How can anybody reconcile this? So they were too incompetent to come to any conclusion at all? So this is straight from idfiles.com, the FBI Arkansas Bureau. Brief overview. All investigations of the murders of Kevin and Dawn have been shot down, and nobody has been indicted for anything. Along the way, several witnesses were murdered. Many more were threatened, intimidated, and even imprisoned. Legitimate investigators were discredited and fired, while those who participated in the cover-ups were protected, rewarded, and promoted. Then, FBI Special Agent Phyllis Cornyn was put in charge of investigating the murders and all previous shut-down investigations. Linda and I worked with Cornyn for a year, and although she was careful to stay within guidelines of working with civilians, we had reason to believe that she had made the case we had been waiting for. Somebody really messed up by letting Cornyn do her job. So this is from idfiles.com. So this is a team of investigators here making these statements. Around this time, I.C. Smith, a high-level agent from D.C., I wonder if that's his real name, I.C. Smith, Agent Smith, a high-level agent from D.C., was brought in, and it wasn't long before Linda and I recognized another shutdown coming. The archives below is the documented story of our clash with the FBI and Smith. In the end, Phyllis was fired, Smith was forced into early retirement, and the FBI closed its investigation. This was number 6. Wait, so there were 6 investigations? Note that no investigation that we know of looked at the mean connection to the murders, which supports our belief that Mina was the reason the murders of Kevin and Dawn would never be solved. It's interesting to note that 7 such investigations of Mina drug smuggling suffered similar fates. So there were, wait, was this 6 investigations of the Boys on the Tracks murders? And then there were 7 other investigations of Mina drug smuggling that just terminated with no resolution? The end of the FBI's investigation of the murders was not the end of our challenging the FBI. It has been a 2 decades-long ongoing challenge, but the FBI has been exposed for what it is. Replying to FOIA requests for documents, they claimed they had 0. But after an inquiry from Senator Vic Snyder, they admitted to having 17,000. To date, we have received about 2,000 heavily redacted pages, but they tell us more than the FBI intended. See the collage our researcher made from a few of the documents from those from 2000. And I will put the collage up on the screen right now. This is all from idfiles.com. And there are some interesting unredacted pieces here. There are indeed. So coincidence theorists, brace yourselves. I mean, are there people out there that think they just smoked, these 2 kids just smoked a bunch of marijuana and were run over and there's nothing to see here? Almost every case involving conspiracy has at least some of those types of goofs. there's actually a whole petition to release further documents. So, supposedly no records were located, and then all of a sudden in 2000, 16,600, I wonder why it was in 16,666, pages were responsive to requests. This cover-up supposedly involves political officials, cover-up of the murder, attempted cover-up of an investigation, cover-up, and the investigation exists. Saline County officials may have conspired to cover up the investigation into the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. So this is all from official documentation. What do all the coincidence theorists make of this? Here's even more statements here. From the documents. After this murder was aired on Unsolved Mysteries, Harmon put Richard Garrett in charge of all leads. Individuals would call in with info, and a formal statement was never taken. The individual would then be threatened by telephone to keep his or her mouth shut. Does this sound like a legit investigation to anybody? I mean, what is going on here? What the heck is going on here? So was the FBI brought in to put the kibosh on any kind of legit investigation? Was the goof sheriff on payroll? I mean, this is so curious here. The investigation by Little Rock FBI has revealed possible law enforcement involvement in the deaths. So, I mean, obviously there are some good FBI agents somewhere, somehow, not involved in cover-ups. And the fact that this is all in the documentation that wasn't redacted, I mean, what's most of them were redacted that were released, and there's many thousands more that were not released. So, what does this all mean if this was unredacted, or did they simply forget to redact? Surrounding this case are at least 6 murders with possible links. Investigation at this point in time reveals that a cover-up in the investigation exists with law enforcement. Cover-up of an investigation of the Ives Henry homicide in Saline County, Arkansas during redacted and drug dealing by public officials in this county. So public officials, I mean, are these politicians in addition to law enforcement? Investigation has revealed that law enforcement officials in the Little Rock area may have been involved in captioned homicide. At that point, evidence from the Henry Ives case began to be misplaced. So that's intentionally misplaced. Law enforcement officials alleged to be involved in drug trafficking in Saline County. As a result of numerous homicides surrounding the incident related to the boys, individuals are very scared to talk to anyone due to fear for their own life. The Little Rock Division has been gathering intelligence on current political corruption in Saline County, which will parallel the corruption resulting in captioned victims' deaths. This alleged cover-up supposedly involves law enforcement and political officials. It is now believed that all of these individuals are connected in the cover-up investigation regarding the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. Judge John Cole was paid to appoint Dan Harmon as a special prosecutor in the Ives Henry case. Well, that's a big one. That's kind of interesting. So this is from the official FOIA documents. What does everybody make of this? Judge John Cole was paid to appoint Harmon as special prosecutor. Paid to appoint. There are numerous references in these pages regarding a drug war going on in Saline County, as well as the law enforcement involvement in drug trafficking. In light of a possible law enforcement cover-up, it is requested that the FBI remake a tape on Unsolved Mysteries to replace the current tape running. Whoa! Whoa! It is request. So in the official documents, we have official requests to remake Unsolved Mysteries tape. So they want to swap. They want to bait and switch because there was too much revealed in the original episode. What? For all the coincidence theorist goofs who hallucinate that government agents would never do things like this. I mean, this is right in the official documentation. Based on the foregoing, it is my recommendation that the FBI conduct no further investigation into this matter. Ivian C. Smith, Special Agent in Charge, FBI, State of Arkansas. Wow. Are there still any conspiracy deniers at this point? I mean, this is bonkers stuff. This is bonkers stuff. And they originally said there were no records at all. That's kind of curious. That's kind of curious. Something else is here says, to not be a bloodline family, the Clintons must have put in some serious work to get the protections they've had. Sick, evil people. Let me do a poll here. What does everybody in the chat think if there was corruption involved in this case? Let's see what everybody says. So, unfortunately, Linda Ives, the mother of Kevin Ives, died age 71 in 2021, who fought for answer for decades. But she was involved in this investigation here. We're going to go over the FBI timeline in a second. I will leave the poll running here. Wow, 100% of people in the chat who voted said corruption in this case, yes. So let's go through the timeline here by Linda Ives. December 93, I was contacted by a witness who claimed to have been present at the tracks the night Kevin and Don were murdered. Although it had long been rumored that our local prosecutor Dan Harmon was involved, I was stunned when the witness placed Harmon on the tracks with the boys the night they were murdered. The eyewitnesses, hereby referred to as EW for eyewitnesses, was extremely reluctant. The eyewitness was extremely reluctant to trust any law enforcement officer of any kind but I convinced EW to meet with Saline County Detective John Brown, who had been working the case for about a year. Brown took EW to the Little Rock FBI office where EW was interrogated and immediately placed into protective custody. Surprised by the FBI's drastic action based on one interview, Brown was told by FBI officials that EW's testimony confirmed information they already had. Several days later, EW passed an FBI polygraph. So that was December 93. February 94, the Little Rock FBI officially took control of the case. When John Brown informed me that the FBI had instructed him to turn over all evidence in the case, I was immediately outraged. And after having witnessed the 1990 federal investigation manipulated and shut down by Chuck Banks, some of the names in this case, I was suspicious of their motive. February 28, 94, I called the ranking FBI official Brown had been dealing with, Administrative Special Agent Al Finch. When I voiced my suspicions and objections to the FBI's sudden interest in the case, my fear was heightened by Finch's untruthful response. He stated that the FBI was only an assisting agency and their role was very minor. According to Finch, the FBI was simply conducting some forensic tests for Saline County Sheriff's Office. I called his hand and told him I knew that they had ordered Brown to turn over all evidence in the case. Finch then told me if I would, quote, sit back and let the FBI do their job, the case will be solved by the end of the year, end quote. My detailed notes made of that conversation state that this was not a pleasant conversation. March 1st, 94, Al Finch called me back and told me he thought I had misunderstood what he had told me the day before. I told him that I hadn't misunderstood anything and that I hoped he had not misunderstood me. I might have to sit back and watch another investigation of my son's murder be shut down, but I would not sit quietly this time. He again told me that the case would be solved by the end of the year. That's kind of messed up. If you're a head FBI agent, you're telling the mother of a murdered child the case will be solved by the end of the year. And then it's not solved? That's kind of messed up. Not only not solved, but is this guy intentionally railroading the case? My notes of this conversation state Finch's call was as close as you can get with to get to an apology without being one. Early March 94, my husband Larry and I began communicating with Phyllis Cornyn, the FBI agent assigned to the case, and were told that Little Rock FBI had recommended to the Justice Department in Washington that Chuck Banks be charged with obstruction of justice for shutting down the 1990 federal investigation. Also, in early March, Phyllis called Gene Duffy's brother, David Kesey, asking for Gene's assistance. When Gene had not returned her call in a couple of weeks, Phyllis called David back and asked him to at least tell Gene that the Little Rock FBI office had recommended that Chuck Banks be charged with obstruction of justice. This info persuaded Gene to get involved in the case again. March 18th, 94, Gene made contact with Phyllis. They spent many hours talking on the phone over the next several months. Although Gene and I had not yet met, we were both exchanging info with Phyllis. At one point, Phyllis told me that, quote, no one was failing polygraphs but cops, end quote. Let me say that again for the coincidence theorists. Quote, no one was failing polygraphs but cops, end quote. That's dark. Summer 94. By this time, Gene and I had both developed a great deal of confidence and respect for Phyllis. Gene had come to Arkansas during the summer, and we exchanged files, interviews, documents, and names of informants. Gene had also met with John Brown, and when all the info was put together, it became clear that Kevin and Don were murdered over a drug drop connected to the Mina drug smuggling operation. So, Wow. So this is the mother of Kevin Ives stating in no uncertain terms here, it became clear that Kevin and Don were murdered over a drug drop connected to the Mina drug smuggling op. It wasn't until then we understood why federal and state officials participated in the cover-up of Kevin and Don's murder. Jean had been discredited, her task force dismantled, and the 1990 federal grand jury investigation shut down, all to prevent exposure of the Mina drug smuggling op. To prevent the same thing from happening to Phyllis's investigation, Jean urged her to keep the scope of her investigation local, which was very frustrating, but it also seemed to be working. We were assured by Phyllis repeatedly that it was obvious from the info we were receiving from her the case was progressing very well. 1995. Despite Al Finch's promise that the case would be solved by the end of the year, 94 came and went with no arrests in the case. By mid-95, the familiar signs of another shutdown were developing. Now, I wonder if this Finch goof ever talked to her again after that. Oh, he did. I'm going to get to the timeline here. But so this guy tells this grieving mother the case will be solved by the end of the year, several years after the murders, and then it's not solved. Like, why would you even say that? Well, I mean, whether involved in the conspiracy or not, why would you say the case is going to be solved by the end of the year? Unless he's a good guy and he was damn confident and he didn't realize the scope of the corruption. But how could he not realize? I mean, he's this high-ranking FBI agent. Okay, so by mid 95, familiar signs of another shutdown were developing. One clue was when FBI agent and Harmon buddy Floyd Hayes, who Jean and other investigators familiar with the case and the Mina investigation had reason not to trust, was assigned an offshoot case to look into public corruption in Saline County. Sick at heart, we asked Phyllis if Hayes would have access to the files on Kevin and Don. He would. Jean told Phyllis, this is the beginning of the end. Phyllis was also very concerned about this, but assured us that steps had been taken that would make shutting down the case impossible. She was wrong. November 95. After Phyllis failed to return several phone calls, I called FBI headquarters and requested a meeting with Al Finch. Oh, maybe, I guess she didn't talk to Finch again. I was told that Finch was out of the country and they didn't know when he would return. So wait a second. So this FBI, high-ranking FBI guy, so is he out of the country for vacation or work? Because the FBI is the local federal agency, not international. That would be the CIA. Interesting. I was told that the number 2 man in the Arkansas FBI, Bill Temple, was who I needed to see. A meeting with Temple was scheduled. And you got to really appreciate just the dedication these parents have to trying to solve their kids' murders, because all these corrupt scum in the government aren't doing anything. So these parents just have to have just the amount of fortitude, like Noreen Gosh and all these parents, just the amount of fortitude they have to keep dealing with these stonewalling scum preventing justice for their children. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. November 29th, 95, Larry and I met with Temple and Phyllis. Temple stated he thought he knew why we were there, but why didn't we start by telling him? I began by reading him my notes of my two conversations with Al Finch in 1994 and asked for an explanation as to why the case was dragging on. We were suddenly joined by John Kelly, an attorney for the FBI. I continued and asked Temple about the 3 eyewitnesses I knew of who placed Dan Harmon on the tracks the night of the murders. He claimed they had no credibility. Wow. So these eyewitnesses who passed Polly's, at least one of which was placed into witness protection, had no credibility. Wow. I mean, this is so crazy. This is so crazy. So witnesses who the FBI place in protection have no credibility according to the FBI. Oh, man. I asked him about certain physical evidence that I knew about. He dismissed them as unimportant. I was like, how would he know if it's important or not if the case isn't solved? I asked him about DNA results from blood and semen found on the boy's clothing. He claimed they were unable to extract DNA for testing. Temple then told us that, quote, FBI has no evidence of anything, including evidence that a crime has been committed. And it is time for you to consider the fact that a crime has not been committed, end quote. So Temple's basically saying that the FBI is just that incompetent? Or involved in the cover-up. Stunned and devastated, I walked out of the meeting in tears. I mean, imagine telling a mother this. This is crazy. And this is after the FBI had already confirmed homicide. One week later, Gene and I then began making good on my promise to Finch in '94 that while I might have to watch another federal investigation be shut down, I would not do it quietly this time. That old hammer they had always used, don't do anything to jeopardize the case, didn't work anymore. Gene and I started talking to anyone and everybody who would listen, no holds barred. December 10th, 95, the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review printed an article about the shutdown of the case in which I quoted Temple's statement that a crime had not been committed. A few days later, Gene taped a telephone conversation with Phyllis. Phyllis stated she was disappointed that the meeting had been reported to the media. Gene asked if there was anything in the article that was inaccurate, and Phyllis said that there wasn't. In fact, referring to my quote in the Tribune explaining Temple's statement that a crime had not been committed, Phyllis verified that that's what Temple said. Phyllis stated that I had quoted the assistant special agent in charge verbatim. That's kind of weird. Wait, so Phyllis said she was disappointed that the meeting was reported to the media, but she never disputed the veracity of the report. This is all kind of weird. 95 ended on the lowest note ever for me. January 20th, 96, I got back on track and fired off an angry letter to Bill Temple. You know what's kind of weird, too, because Finch is saying this homicide case is going to be solved by the end of 94, and then in 95, this Bill Temple goof is saying that the crime hasn't even been committed in the first place. I mean, just think about the goofery involved here. Just think about the goofery. Because you have one high-ranking FBI agent saying the case will be solved by the end of the year. I mean, he must. So that's a lot of information. So the FBI already confirmed that these are homicides. So they have so much evidence that Finch is saying by the end of the year, they don't even need a full year to round this out. Then the next guy in charge all of a sudden is saying they have no evidence and that there wasn't even a crime committed. I mean, is the FBI just simply a perfect mix of incompetency and corruption? So nobody will ever nobody will ever get to anything. January 25th, 96, Gene was a guest on the Pat Lynch radio show on KARN in Little Rock. Lynch, who has the largest radio audience in Arkansas, had been a champion of this story in spite of his political views and support of the Clintons against suggestions they're involved in any type of conspiracy, like the Mina cover-up. Gene read portions of my letter repeating Temple's asinine quote, publicly exposing what went on in that November 29th meeting set off a controversy, which was the beginning of the next phase of my dealings with the FBI. January 31st, 96, I.C. Smith, the head, Agent Smith, The head of the FBI in Arkansas gave an interview to the Benton Courier, the small local paper which was instrumental in the smear campaign on Jean. Smith told the Courier that, quote, Temple is a caring individual who has been very concerned because he has been so badly misquoted. The Courier article says that Smith is convinced that Temple said nothing to Ives in such a cold-hearted manner, end quote. So if he's convinced, an FBI agent is convinced that another FBI agent told him the truth. Oh, man. Wow. I mean, the level of goofery in addition to the corruption. I mean, this isn't just corruption. This is corrupt goofery. This is a new category of goofery and corruption. I.C. Smith's interview, bungled defense, February 1st, 96. Because the Courier printed Smith's statements without giving me an opportunity to respond to Smith, in essence calling me a liar, I responded in a letter distributed as a news release. The same day, Jean wrote a letter to I.C. Smith informing him that she had his own agent, who was a witness to Temple's statement on audio tape, verifying that I had quoted Temple correctly. I mean, this is kind of awesome. This mother just taking it to the corrupt FBI, lying about her. Can you imagine? Like, how much of corrupt scum do you have to be? Not just to cover this all up, but to go out of your way lying about the mother of a murdered child. Wow. I mean, does the FBI have no shame? First week of February 96, since Smith said in his interview to the Courier that, quote, would be willing to meet me personally with Mrs. Ives and discuss the case, I called to request an appointment for Larry and me. A meeting was scheduled February 8th, 96 at 2 p.m. February 8th, 96. As time for our appointment with Smith drew near, Larry, who had been an irregular work schedule as a locomotive engineer, had not yet gotten in from work. This is kind of weird, though. So Larry, the father, is a locomotive engineer, and his son is killed by a locomotive. Anybody think that's all mere coincidence? I mean, out of all the jobs someone can have, so the population of Arkansas was 2.342 million in 1987. So there's only 32,000 locomotive engineers in the entire country today, with a much higher population. So back in the 80s, I mean, not a lot of locomotive engineers. I mean, this is interesting. I don't know. Is that coincidental? Is that coincidental? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. So, anyway, going on here. So, Larry, his father, irregular work schedules, locomotive engineer, had not yet gotten in from work. After the recent events and Smith's obvious lack of regard for the truth, I was reluctant and, in fact, unwilling to meet with Smith without a witness to whatever might transpire or what might be said at our meeting. I called Smith to ask if we could delay the meeting until the following morning so that Larry could be there. I was quite surprised at Smith's obvious anger and reaction to my simple request. Smith made several remarks about my behavior in the press which he felt was inappropriate. He felt inappropriate that a grieving mother was defending herself against corrupt FBI agents saying that she was lying. He then asked why I wanted to meet with him and stated he didn't see any reason for us to meet. I reminded him that it was he who suggested a meeting in his statements to the Courier. At that point, the conversation literally turned into a screaming match before I hung up on him. Now, is that the type of professionalism one would think an FBI agent would possess? He's screaming at the mother of a murdered child. I mean, this is kind of weird. I mean, everybody kind of knows why, though, because she called the goof out. She wants justice. He's lying and covering it up. So, I mean, yeah, this is crazy. Late March 96, Obstruction of Justice was released. Gene and I devoted thousands of hours to researching and editing the video in an effort to make it factual and informative. We began making appearances via telephone on talk radio throughout the country in an effort to expose the corruption surrounding Kevin and Don's murders. We made no bones about the FBI's participation in the cover-up, and in fact frequently detail my meeting with Bill Temple and I.C. Smith's response in the Courier. June 7th, 96, two Houston FBI agents interviewed Gina and her at her home in Pasadena, Texas. An internal investigation is being conducted on Phyllis. The reason, she did her job too well. There is ample evidence that a crime was committed, and in fact, the FBI knows who committed it. However, the investigation that uncovered the truth must be discredited, and what better way to discredit an investigation than to discredit the investigator? Gene can testify to that. So one more letter here from Gene. Two questions asked most. If the FBI confirmed the murders, how can they also hold that no crime was committed? Two, who in the FBI confirmed the murders and the relationship to Mina and when? By Gene Duffy. The answer to the first question, that's what we'd like to know, but then the contradiction isn't that big of a deal, not to the media anyway. A summary of other inconsistent statements made to the media by FBI Little Rock director I.C. Smith. Smith says he doesn't know whether or not the boys were murdered, but he says the FBI did conduct a thorough investigation of the murders, though he says he doesn't think they have jurisdiction to investigate the murders, yet he says their investigation of the murders is still open. This is kind of weird. I mean, is he just playing this level of stupid? So he doesn't even understand jurisdiction on a case he's the head of? What? And actively investigating? On an open case? So which is it, Smith? Murders or no murders, jurisdiction or no jurisdiction, case open or case closed? What is even more disgusting than Smith making such asinine statements is that the media allowed him to get by with it. To answer the second question, during the 18 months Linda and I worked with Agent Phyllis Cornyn, she made many comments that lead us to believe the FBI had the murders solved and knew the government had participated in a cover-up. Examples. In late fall 94, I passed info on to Cornyn from a pilot who claims to have been a CIA operative and says he flew the Saline County drop on occasion. The pilot told me the Saline County drop was part of the Mina drug smuggling operation and that after one of these drops came up missing, those responsible for protecting it hid out to ambush whoever might show up for another drop. The pilot said that Kevin and Don showed up, were beaten and killed, and were laid on the tracks to cover the signs of murder. Wow, okay, so this theory actually makes a lot more sense than them just randomly stumbling upon something. Because if they thought that these boys were somehow involved in intercepting another drop that went missing, then, and they wanted to ambush them because they thought that these were the individuals that picked up the drop. So is it possible that Harmon or some other criminals, law enforcement, whatever, they wanted a bigger piece of the pie, so they stole the drop. And obviously, uncovering all of this would expose everything, including the government complicity on the other side. Give me 1 second. I need to pull. Trying to find some aerial photos here, which is proving quite difficult, of the Mina airport. Just wanted to get a lay of the land. But apparently, it's not that easy. I found something here. I couldn't find any really great maps of the entire area, but Mina Intermountain Airport. So yeah, there's a national forest nearby. There's quite a lot of forest in the area. So I suppose there's good hunting to be found. So if this was some kind of an accident, the theory that a drop was intercepted, and then all these criminals are kind of waiting to ambush the next drop. And is that what happened? They ambushed these two teenagers thinking they were looking for the drop? Cornyn had been involved in polygraphing witnesses and suspects during this time period, and several weeks after I passed on the pilot's story, she told me she verified the story through polygraph tests. Junior Coltrane in the chat says, Trump told me to check out your channel. He said you're awesome. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump listens to MINDSHOCK. Robert Belt in the chat says, I started following this case in the early 90s. It's a cover-up from top to bottom. Look at the FOIA reports and notes. FBI, CIA, DEA, and the local law enforcement were all involved. That is not normal. The Clinton. Cornyn told Linda they had polygraphed Danny Allen, a city cop at the time of the murders, and the FBI could prove at the very least that Allen helped lay the bodies on the tracks. It's quite damning testimony there. The first face-to-face meeting I had with Cornyn, she slipped me a note in her handwriting that says, quote, Lib Carlisle, the state Democratic Party chairman, was supposedly responsible for calling the Capitol in Little Rock to back the state police off the train deaths case. Interesting. Cornyn told Linda and I on several occasions late in the investigation that Linda should file a civil suit and that we would have no problem proving government official cover-up of the murders. Cornyn said we should subpoena her and the FBI files. Wait, did they not do this? Why wouldn't they do it? Throughout the investigation, Cornyn repeatedly told Linda and me that the investigation was going very well. During one of the last communications Linda had with Cornyn, Cornyn told her they had one more person to poly, which should bring the investigation to a close. That is apparently what happened. Cornyn was not the only one assuring Linda that the case was going well. Cornyn's supervisor, Al Finch, told Linda she should sit back and let the FBI do its job and that she would be very pleased with the outcome. So was Finch really in on it, or was he a good agent who genuinely believed the corruption would be exposed and then he was just relocated after the fix came in? Although Linda and I felt that Cornyn was very forthright during her 18-month-long investigation, signs began to appear that caused us concern. We recorded telephone conversations that will prove several lies the FBI has told. We'll, of course, be passing the notes on to you. Thanks for your support and your prayers. Both help keep us going. Gene Duffy. And all of these documents that were FOIA'd can be found on idfiles.com. Wow. I mean, this is really shocking stuff. I mean, is this one of the most absolute blatant conspiracy and cover-ups? I mean, could it be any more blatant? If it were more blatant, what would it look like? ID Files also has an outline here of all of the murdered witnesses. So we're going to take a look at this here. A brief rundown from the wiki before we go deeper. Keith McCaxel was an informant for Dan Harmon and had taken aerial photographs of the crime scene. He was murdered in 1988, 2 days after Sheriff Steed lost his election. So this corrupt sheriff goof, he loses the election, his re-election, big surprise, and all of a sudden people start dying? Keith Cohn was scheduled to testify before the grand jury in the case, died in a motorcycle accident early January 89. Greg Collins, who was also called to testify before the grand jury, was an acquaintance of Keith Cohn, was killed by 3 shots from a shotgun January 26, 89. See, motorcycle accidents happen, but what are the chances that the friend or acquaintance of the guy that died in the motorcycle accident gets killed by a shotgun the same month? Daniel Booney Bearden was another witness who disappeared without a trace. March 89. Jeffrey Edward, whose body was found in a landfill April 89, was also linked to the case. The deaths were classified as murder cases, no arrests made. So, wow. Let's go a little deeper here. I don't know if I've seen a deep dive on each and every one of these witnesses, but this is MINDSHOCK, so we will be going deep. There's actually even more witnesses which nobody talks about. I mean, this is just such a weird case. But like I said, I mean, this might be the most blatant, obvious case. I mean, obviously Stephen Avery's up there as well. Just give me another couple seconds to bring this all up. But I definitely get why this case was requested. On MINDSHOCK, a lot to dig through. Quite a bit to dig through here. I mean, some of this is just so tragic that so many people died in connection, not just the 2 teenagers, but all these other people. And the FBI maintained at the end that there's nothing to see here, and that no crime may have even been committed in the first place. So all these witnesses just happened to die because no crime was committed. Interesting. While the FBI's own documentation demonstrates a cover-up. I'll have it up in another couple seconds. Almost done here. What's also weird is that with all of these other murders, apparently none of them were investigated either, which is kind of weird. Nobody finds that weird. That all these other witnesses just go, some of them go missing, most of them the bodies are found, no investigation is done. Anybody find that just a tad bit strange? Just a little bit? I mean, the mind shocks are just not gonna stop coming here. So let's look at all these other witnesses. So we have Keith Coney. So, May 88, Keith Coney, who was with Kevin and Don moments before they were murdered, likely just escaped himself. Later, he told his dad, other family members, and friends that 2 cops killed Kevin and Don. 2 days later, his throat was cut. While trying to flee, he lost control of his motorcycle and crashed. However, few of these details made it into the police report, and although it was the responsibility of the coroner to order an autopsy, this was not done. So they didn't even do an autopsy? So this was all written off as some kind of standard motorcycle accident. Now, he was this is another individual who was scheduled to testify before a grand jury. So he stated 2 cops killed Kevin and Don. 2 days after telling this to people, apparently his throat is cut. He tried to run away on a motorcycle and crashed. And they tried to write this all off as if this is just some kind of standard motorcycle accident. That's messed up. Robert Belt in the chat says, Mena Airport was the CIA base for shipping guns to the Contras. Barry Seal was bringing back the coke that would kick off the 80s crack epidemic. Maxine Waters was all over the LA sheriffs. Keith McAxel, November 88. McAxel was at the tracks that night with Dan Harmon. Apparently wanting to do the right thing, he talked to Richard Garrett, but he realized he had talked to the wrong person. McAxel made his own funeral arrangements, told family and friends goodbye, and within days he was murdered. An obvious revenge killing, he was stabbed 113 times. There was never a serious investigation of his murder. Well, that's curious. So the guy talked to Richard Garrett. He realized. Does this mean he realized Garrett was in on this? He made his own funeral arrangements and even said goodbye to everybody. Why not just run away? And how often is someone stabbed 113 times? So, Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Richard Garrett was working with Dan Harmon. Hmm. I wonder what happened when they threw Harmon under the bus. Because if Garrett's buddy with Harmon, are they appointed to kind of control the narrative? So they know they want the exhumation and a second autopsy, etc. So they get Harmon and Garrett to kind of be their inside guys to control the narrative. And was Harmon. So was Harmon. So McCaxill says he was with Harmon at the tracks that night. So there were also two other police officers there? And then there was Harmon and McCaxill? So McCaxill blows the whistle to Garrett, but so did he not think Garrett was corrupt with Harmon? I mean, why didn't he tell other people? I mean, I don't know. A lot of this does not make sense. Definitely does not make sense. Gregory Collins, January 89. Collins failed to appear after being subpoenaed by John Cole at the request of Dan Harmon to testify before the Salem County Grand Jury, was killed by a shotgun blast to the face. His murder also remains unsolved. So, did the FBI also. So, if the FBI verified all of this, were. I wonder if there were just compromised agents within the FBI who weren't in on the conspiracy originally, and then so they were honestly investigating at the beginning, or was it all a sham from the beginning? They wanted to find out what really happened so that they could silence it to make sure nothing ever got out after. We also have Booney Bearden here, March 89. Booney Bearden, a friend of both Coney and Collins, disappeared. An article of Bearden's clothing was found in the vicinity where an anonymous caller claimed this murder had taken place. His body was never found. So an anonymous caller called in a murder, or where his murder. So specifically, did they specifically know that Booney Bearden was the one who was murdered? And there was a piece of clothing there. This guy also was friends with Coney and Collins. All more coincidence, perhaps? We have Jeff Rhodes, April 89. Rhodes was murdered after telling his family he knew too much about Kevin, Don, and McCaskill's murders. Rhodes shot in the head, his remains set on fire in a dump. This is all just very, very disturbing. Because even if these guys are all lying, why do people keep coming up dead who know these people? Because if they're all lying, like, what's the point of killing them? What's the point of killing all the people who know them? Jordan Kettleson, June 90, was believed to be connected to the McCaskill murder, killed by a shotgun blast to the head. There's a lot of people being killed with shotgun blasts. I mean, other guns exist. I mean, there's revolvers and rifles. No police investigation. The body was cremated before an autopsy could be performed. I'm sure that's all coincidental as well. I mean, with this level of coincidence, I mean, this really is shaping up to be an Avery-like case. I mean, it actually seems way more damning than even the Avery case. And lastly, we have Mike Samples here. Possibly not lastly, but so was Kettleson. What do they mean by connected to the McCaskill? So did Kettleson kill McCaskill? And then somehow he was compromised, so they got rid of him as well? Mike Samples, June 95. Another grand jury witness was shot to death. Sources claim he was involved in retrieving drugs dropped from airplanes. Authorities have denied any connections of his case with murders of Kevin and Don. Well, how would they know, though? Like, if that case isn't solved? That's something that always raises an eyebrow for anybody who's not a clueless coincidence theorist. I mean, so that's 7 deaths in close connection with people involved. The other thing that kind of jumps out at me here is none of these guys were killed within the exact time, like within super close to the murders of Kevin and Don. Because, I mean, this was August 87, and nobody's turning up dead until mid to late 88, almost a whole year. So, were they confident that this would all be swept under the rug, and then when it wasn't, and there's this grand jury, now all of a sudden people are turning up dead? So did they just not think that all these witnesses would be believed and there wouldn't ever be a legit investigation? Let me read the write-up on Richard Garrett on ID Files. Garrett participated in the original Train Deaths episode of Unsolved Mysteries along with Dan Harmon as the primary spokesman. Linda Ives did not know at this time that Harmon and Garrett were involved in the murders and were masterminding a heinous cover-up to protect the evidence of their involvement, so she gladly participated in the episode. In reality, Harmon and Garrett were in the ideal position of control, including access to callers on the tips line set up by Unsolved Mysteries. All caller info was given to Harmon and Garrett, who pretended to investigate, but instead responded with violent threats to callers with info damaging to them. Months later, Linda learned that Harmon was actually on the tracks with the boys the night they were murdered and was a likely participant in the murders. She warned the producers of Unsolved Mysteries, and they were willing to make necessary changes if the FBI would endorse the corrections. But the FBI would not. And from the FOIA documents, the FBI wanted to even replace the Unsolved Mysteries taped episode for a different tape, because I guess they thought too much was revealed even then. At the time, Linda and Jean thought that the FBI was conducting a forthright investigation and did not want to jeopardize their case. But as it turned out, they conducted the most shameless cover-up of all, which ended all official investigations. It's difficult to believe the depth and reach of the cover-up, but the evidence presented throughout this website leaves little doubt of the absolute validity of this realization. Attorney Richard Garrett was Dan Harmon's sidekick, his right-hand man, his lapdog, his shadow, his yes man. Get the picture? If Dan Harmon was involved, Richard Garrett was involved. Garrett was also Harmon's assistant when Harmon headed the county grand jury investigation of the train deaths. Garrett was always Harmon's deputy when Harmon was the district's prosecutor. According to a U.S. Attorney inner office memo, Dan Harmon and Richard Garrett were primary targets of the 1990 federal grand jury investigation of public official corruption in Saline County. And this memo is included. This is the Bob Govar memo, dated February 13th, 1990. For the coincidence theorists who think this is all just rumor and nonsense, here's the actual memo. Quite damning. Saline County investigation. Wow. Quite a long list here. Michael Bearden is on this list as well. There's a lot of witnesses here. Wow. Teresa Harmon? Wow. So these guys found out that they were the subject of this investigation. Is that why all these other people ended up dead? Once they found out how many witnesses they actually were? I mean, this is all mind-shocking stuff here. When U.S. Attorney Chuck Banks cleared Dan Harmon of any wrongdoing, he also cleared Garrett. Garrett is now deceased, so all that he knows has gone to the grave with him, although there are rumors he left a statement about his knowledge of the boys' murders to be opened 5 years after his death. So, if this is the same Richard Garrett, yeah, he died October 23rd, 2018. So that has now expired. Although, even if he did leave a memo, and other people knew about the memo, they would obviously block it from being released anyway. Garrett was Harmon's assistant when Harmon headed the county grand jury investigation of the train deaths. Garrett has been Harmon's deputy at all times. Harmon has been the district's prosecutor. According to a U.S. Attorney Inter-Office memo, They were the subject of... Okay, they were the targets of the investigation. Wow. Wow. Here's a clip of Richard Garrett regarding Keith McCaxill's murder. This is unbelievable stuff here.
Thank that Mr. McCaskill was probably suffering from a lot of paranoia. And right now the indications are that nobody else was involved.
Might there have been a reason, though, for his paranoia?
I'm sure there was a reason for his paranoia.
Because he talked to the police or the prosecutor?
I don't know that that would be the reason. I think that
Is that Duper's Delight there? See a little bit of a smile creeping in, a little bit hard to see because of the mustache. So keep in mind, let's keep this in mind. How did McCaskill die? He was stabbed 113 times, Garrett saying no one else was involved. So is Garrett suggesting here that Keith McCaskill stabbed himself 113 times and there was a good reason for his paranoia? What does everybody make of Garrett's statements here? Sphinx Bear in the chat. Haven't seen Sphinx Bear in quite a while indeed. We are going over one of the cases of some of the most obvious corruption in history, in modern history. I mean, this is crazy. Richard Garrett here, along with Harmon, apparently either directly involved or covering up for those involved. Now, this is kind of crazy, though. These statements regarding McCaskill, I mean, that's crazy. There's another video here on the grieving families of the other witnesses that were killed. So let's take a look at this.
May 1988. Keith Coney, who was believed to be with Kevin and Dawn that night, told friends and family members that law enforcement officials were responsible for the murders. 2 days later, he was killed when his motorcycle crashed while he was being chased. According to some officers, his throat had previously been slashed, and he was apparently fleeing his attackers when he lost control. However, this crucial information was left out of the final report. There was no autopsy or investigation.
And I don't think it was an accident because he was fearing for his life, you know, a couple of months before. He said a couple of times that he knew people, that he was being watched and he was afraid.
So what do the coincidence theorists maintain here? That all the friends and family of these witnesses that were killed, they're all lying? Like, what do the coincidence theorists maintain here? Robert Belt in the chat says, Garrett and Harmon worked hand in hand in the biggest cover-up in Arkansas, Oliver North took the fall for President Reagan over the Iran-Contra affair. Remember Nancy Reagan's quote, "Just say no." Should have been saying no to corruption.
Mrs. Alexander says her son knew the two teenagers run over by the train, and she says he indicated to her he had been there when the boys had died, that he spotted two attackers.
But he knew there was two there. I did try to get him to tell me who, and he was either afraid or didn't know.
November 1988. Keith McCaskill, who was allegedly at the tracks that night, turned over information he had about the boys' murders to Richard Garrett. Believing he had talked to the wrong people, McCaskill had made his own funeral arrangements, told family and friends goodbye, and within days was murdered himself, stabbed 113 times.
So, I mean, so he stabbed 113 times, and Garrett is saying no one else was involved, and he had good reason to be paranoid. I mean, what does that mean?
His murder remains unsolved.
The night of elections in 1988, he took 2 pennies out of his pocket and threw them on the bar there at the Wagon Wheel and said, "If Jim Steed loses this election, my life isn't worth 2 cents." And he was murdered that night.
Harmon, Garrett, and members of the Arkansas police suddenly found themselves in the awkward position of having to try and convince the public that the deaths of these key witnesses, coming at a crucial point in the investigations, were merely a coincidence.
I think that Mr. McCaskill was probably suffering from a lot of paranoia. And right now the indications are that nobody else was involved.
Might there have been a reason, though, for his paranoia?
I'm sure there was a reason for his paranoia.
Because he had talked to the police or the prosecutor?
I don't know that that would be the reason.
What about the murder? Is it connected at all with the grand jury investigation?
Not that we know of.
McCaskill was a witness in the Bryant.
Not that we know of. I mean, just look at the body language of these goofs. Like, do these look like competent individuals that even care? I mean, just the tone, the delivery, not that we know. Like, it's just so weird. They do have also very defensive posture, especially Garrett here.
About the murder, is it connected at all with the grand jury investigation?
Not that we know of.
McCaskill was a witness in the Bryant train deaths investigation. Although police haven't ascertained a motive for the murder, they say there's no connection.
We link this investigation to the deaths of Don Henry or Kevin Ives, and I don't foresee anything in the pursuance of the rest of this investigation that would be anything that would make me change my mind.
Those believing in a massive cover-up by police and elected officials, which included the possible murder of witnesses, watched in horror as the death toll continued to climb.
That's actually very telling here, because this corrupt and or incompetent state police
They say McCaskill was a witness in the Bryant train deaths investigation. Although police haven't ascertained a motive for the murder, they say there's no connection.
That they're not connected, and he hasn't seen anything that would change his mind. Why is his mind made up during an open investigation that's not solved? Why would his mind need to be changed? if this is a legitimate investigator and it's unsolved, that means you don't know if there are or aren't any connections. And why would your mind even need to be changed from taking a position that they're not connected? A lot of Freudian slips there. A lot of Freudian slips. How could you need your mind changed on an unsolved case regarding another unsolved case? I mean, the level of goofer here, but the Freudian slip is very obvious there.
To the rest of this investigation, it would be anything that would make me change my mind.
Those believing in a massive cover-up by police and elected officials, which included the possible murder of witnesses, watched in horror as the death toll continued to climb. January 1989. Greg Collins, who failed to appear after being subpoenaed to testify before Kevin and Don's grand jury, was killed by a shotgun blast to the face. His murder remains unsolved. March 1989. Booney Bearden, a friend of both Coney and Collins, disappeared. An article of Bearden's clothing was found in the vicinity where an anonymous caller claimed his murder had taken place. His body was never recovered. April 1989. Jeff Rhodes was murdered after telling his family he knew too much about Kevin, Don, and McCaskill's murders. Rhodes had been shot in the head and his remains set on fire in a dump. July 1989. Richard Winters, another grand jury witness, was gunned down during a robbery, which apparently was staged to cover his murder. His case remains unsolved. June 1990. Jordan Kettleson, who was believed to be connected to the McCaskill murder, was killed by a shotgun blast to the head. There was no police investigation, and his body was cremated before an autopsy could be performed. June 1995. Mike Samples, another grand jury witness, was shot to death. Sources claim he had been involved in retrieving drugs dropped from airplanes. Authorities have denied any connection between these cases and the murders of Kevin and Don.
The people whose testimony might have solved this case years ago have systematically been eliminated. There apparently was a great deal of fear that these people could implicate very powerful players.
These people could implicate very powerful players. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So not on the collage here is also Richard Winters. So that's 8 people dead in connection. I mean, who knows how many more there were that weren't reported either. We don't know. Wow, Robert Belt in the chat says, I knew Gary Webb from when he was working in Kentucky as a journalist. He had information about this case, and it literally cost him his life. Shot twice in the back of the head in his motel room. Just to round out the wiki here, The usual theory given about the boys' deaths involved drug trafficking. The theory is that the boys were murdered after witnessing a drug drop from an airplane. This drug trafficking was linked to the operations of Barry Seal and the Mena Airport in nearby Polk County. The 94 conspiracy theory movie The Clinton Chronicles blamed the cover-up of the murders on Billy Clinton, who was governor of Arkansas at the time and was accused to have known about the drug trafficking in his state. The case was profiled on the television program Unsolved Mysteries. Investigative journalist Mara Leverett published the book The Boys on the Tracks, Death, Denial, and a Mother's Crusade to Bring Her Son's Killers to Justice in '99, which deals with the case and the alleged involvement of the authorities in the murders. In '96, Linda Ives and film producer Patrick Matriciana released the documentary Obstruction of Justice, The Mena Connection, in which they made allegations against the authorities. According to the film, the two boys had witnessed a drug deal and were murdered by two local police officers. County prosecutor Dan Harmon is also said to have been involved and later helped the perps with the support of the authorities. Harmon, who had represented the parents of Ives and Henry, was arrested in '97 on charges of racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, and drug possession with intent to distribute and sentenced to 11 years in prison. You know what's kind of weird about that, though? Like, they were confident he wouldn't blow the whistle. The two accused police officers deny any involvement in the case and sued Matriciana and his film company for defamation, whereupon a judge awarded them $600,000. However, Matriciana successfully appealed the verdict, which was overturned in 2001. That's actually quite interesting. Huh. So again, this was not a jury. This was a judge, possibly corrupt and or incompetent, who awarded them $600,000. But this was appealed, and the verdict was overturned. In the 2001 fall issue of the News, Media, and the Law, video producer wins appeal in libel case. So the names of these guys were Jay Campbell and Kirk Lane. Alright, we're going to go over one more thing in this bizarre saga. Might have to do some follow-up episodes as well. I mean, on Reddit, people are talking about other theories, including one of the boys' fathers, and also that they were trespassing on someone's property during the night hunting. That individual killed them and laid them on the tracks. But if that were true, why would all these witnesses be ending up dead? I mean, there are a lot of coincidence theorists out there. I mean, it's kind of weird. A lot of coincidence theorist goofs on Reddit, that's for sure. Apparently, one of the cops named Kirk Lane is this major drug player in Arkansas now, coincidentally. Let me go over one more article here. New witness. Man claims to have seen boys on the tracks murders. And this is Billy Jack Haynes. Now, who knows if this is some kind of publicity stunt? After all these years. But let's go over this article here. Posted February 13th, 2018, KARK.com. March 87, Billy Jack Haynes wrestled in front of a record-setting audience of 93,000 fans at the Pontiac Silverdome in Detroit, Michigan during WrestleMania 3. That same year, 900 miles away, teenagers Kevin Ives and Don Henry were brutally killed in Alexander, Arkansas. Eventually, the case ran cold. Today, 31 years later, Haynes, whose real name is William Albert Haynes, claims he witnessed their deaths, a double homicide. The big question is, why should investigators believe Haynes, and why now? The unsolved crime has been given the label Boys on the Tracks. For 3 decades, people in Saline County and well beyond have tossed around theories, shared ideas, and spread rumors about who was responsible for the deaths of the teens August 23rd, 87. No one has ever been arrested. Kevin Ives' mother is holding on to Haynes' claims as the key to solving who killed her 17-year-old son and 16-year-old Don Henry. Haynes says he sobered up a few years ago and reached out to Larry and Linda Ives after years of guilt. The trio connected with PI Keith Rounsavall, and Haynes spilled his side of the story in a YouTube video designed to raise money for Rounsavall's investigation. I come with no hidden voice. I come to you straight to face because this is reality, man, remarked Haynes in the video. Don't hide nothing. In the taped confession, he claims that while performing in the 80s for the WWE, then the WWF, as a 6'3", 280-pound wrestler, he also transported and trafficked cocaine through the U.S. His side job eventually brought him to Arkansas. I was also an enforcer who provided muscle to other parts of the criminal element to ensure that their illegal business dealings were collected upon, added Haynes. In August 87, I was contacted by an Arkansas criminal politician, I wonder if he's referring to Billy, and was asked if I would provide muscle at an Arkansas drug transaction. In the near 6-minute video, Haynes refers to a male criminal politician multiple times but never names him by name. Haynes says the politician was suspicious that cash from the drug money drops was being stolen. While conducting security for the drug money drop, I witnessed the murders of 2 young boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. They were murdered by other individuals who were working for the same criminal politician. Their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks to be mutilated by a passing train, Haynes alleges. The retired wrestler, now 64, says he reached out to Linda Ives in 2016 to explain what he saw. In addition to providing his account of what happened, Haynes says he handed over names of everyone who was at the scene. And you know what's curious, if those names matched up with all the other witnesses. I'm standing here putting my life on the line, telling you that I could very well be killed, added Haynes. They have to be taken down. The investigation with no end. 4:25 a.m. August 23rd, 87, a train engineer reported running over 2 teens. The worker told authorities the boys were motionless and lying on their backs, their bodies covered by a tarp from the waist down. Investigators later discovered a rifle and flashlight nearby. It's believed Ives and Henry were using those items to headlight for deer. It's an illegal form of hunting where you temporarily blind the animal before shooting it. Friends say the two may have been drinking. So how did they end up on the tracks? Investigators don't conclusively know. The state medical examiner ruled suicide. He thought the boys smoked pot, passed out on the tracks, and then run over by the speeding train. A later autopsy found anything but. An Atlanta-based pathologist found the boys were knocked unconscious or killed before their bodies were dumped on the tracks. A grand jury concluded the deaths to be the result of homicide. Over the years, theories have been spread that the boys walked upon a drug drop and were killed. Rumors have circulated as to who might have been there and ultimately be responsible. The tragic story has been brought to life in books, TV, and movies. No matter the medium, the end is always the same. No conclusion, a family waiting for answers. A mother's quest for justice. After cases turned cold, many investigations quickly vanished. Detectives retire, family and friends move on with their lives. Case files are closed. Linda Ives won't let that happen. Over the years, she has collected every piece of evidence she can get her hands on. She has conducted countless interviews. She remains committed to keeping her son's story in the news cycle until justice is served. In 2016, Ives filed a lawsuit hoping to get unredacted documents from 3 Arkansas law enforcement agencies and 8 federal agencies. 8 federal agencies. Ultimately, the suit claims insufficient response to FOIA requests. Ives alleges a cover-up of the story behind the death of her son, a theory supported by Haynes' claim that a criminal politician was involved. A judge tossed out most of Ives' 2016 lawsuit. However, he ordered the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys, DEA, and Department of Homeland Security to hand over all documents related to the case for his review, according to Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Why is the Department of Homeland Security, that didn't even exist back then, have all these documents? The review continues. After 3 decades with few answers, you can understand why Ives was immediately hopeful when she received a call from Billy Jack Haynes. We're very excited about the info he has, said Ives in a video posted by her PI. A series of questionable statements. This may not be the first time you've heard of the man who claimed to be at the tracks the morning of August 23rd, 87. Many people will remember Billy Jack Haynes as the WWF superstar who battled wrestling titans like Macho Man Randy Savage and Harley Race in the mid-80s. But his notoriety didn't last. He bounced around between jobs. It seemed addiction and aggression was getting the best of him. Or perhaps his conscience. A search of Billy Jack Haynes' names on YouTube will produce a number of interviews riddled with far-fetched claims. Haynes said he had considered killing WWE promoter Vince McMahon, believed McMahon fathered the child of a now-deceased wrestler, and claimed Steve Austin is ultimately responsible for the death of wrestling legend Rowdy Roddy Piper. Well, other than the Austin claim, I mean, are the claims about Vince really that far-fetched? Some would say he has a history of seeing his own truth. However, it's worth noting that Haynes has discussed playing a role in drug trafficking in interviews dating back to the early 2000s. In 2014, Haynes filed a federal lawsuit against WWE alleging egregious mistreatment of its wrestlers for its own benefit. In the suit, he claimed he suffered at least 15 concussions, and that in his 3 years working with the WWE resulted in depressions and symptoms of dementia. The suit was dismissed 2 years later. Even with all that, Ives believes Haynes wouldn't have anything to gain from coming forward about the 87 murder, and she chooses to be optimistic that he can provide new leads in her son's cold case. We're in the process of corroborating his info, added Ives. We feel very hopeful and excited. We're waiting to hear from Saline County investigators about whether they've spoken to or plan to speak with Haynes. You know, it's kind of weird, though. The coincidence theorists, like they say if he's all lying, they kind of point to his drug use, but wouldn't that, I mean, that could be equally corroborative of his story, because if he was involved in all of this, and he was some kind of enforcer, and he did go to drug use to cope or whatever. I mean, a lot of pro wrestlers are into drug use for pain management, etc. I mean, how does that disprove that he's telling the truth? Let's listen to his so-called confession here.
I'm Billy Jack Haynes, former World Wrestling Federation wrestler. Today I come with no mask, I come with no hidden voice, I come to you straight face to face because this is reality, man. Don't hide nothing. 30 years ago, I witnessed the murder of 2 teenagers on the railroad tracks August 23rd in Alexander, Arkansas. 27 years of that, I was a drug addict on pain pill medication. I become clean. It kept bothering me and bothering me and bothering me, and finally, when Seth Rich was killed July 10th, I knew that was a message to me because that's my birthday, July 10th. So here I am coming forward. This is a plea that I'm going to read here for you today. The plea is for those who has yet to contribute to the GoFundMe.com Kevin Ives, Don Henry murders that happened 30 years ago. Please contribute to the fund so that the investigator can continue his work. He says that they still need to interview possible witnesses and gather more information that will assist him in the investigation of the murder of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. Also, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram, hashtag Kevin Ives, hashtag Don Henry. A former drug trafficker, I'm ashamed to say, and a hired enforcer. In the late 70s,
So what does everybody make so far? I mean, I'm not really picking up any obvious signs of deception. I mean, clearly this guy has had a troubled life. I could possibly buy that somebody is forcing him to make this statement, but why would that be? If there's a vast conspiracy and cover-up, I mean, they might be coercing him to not make any kind of statements. So I don't know. Also, with a history of drug use, it's very difficult to read some of these people, but I'm not getting any outright deception here.
And early 1980s, when I was in my 30s, I stood 6'3" and weighed between 260 and 300 pounds. I was very visually intimidating. I'm not proud to say that. In the 1980s, I transported and trafficked large quantities of cocaine throughout the United States of America. I bought cocaine from the largest drug trafficker in the United States, Barry Seal, out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I would then sell that cocaine to contacts around the United States. Barry Seal later introduced me to a politician drug dealer from Arkansas. In 1984, that politician drug dealer asked me to kill David Kennedy, who I later learned was the son of very well-known politician Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of President John F. Kennedy. I was also an enforcer who provided muscle to other parts of the criminal element to ensure that their illegal business dealings were collected upon. In August of 1987, I was contacted by the Arkansas criminal politician and was asked if I would provide muscle at an Arkansas drug stop. The criminal politician suspected that some drug money drops were being stolen. He suspected that the state police officers were involved in the thefts in Arkansas. I agreed to assist with security at the drug drop site. While conducting security for the drug money drop, I witnessed the murders of 2 young boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. They were murdered by other individuals who were working for the same criminal politician. Their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks to be mutilated by a passing train. In late 2016, I contacted Linda Ives and informed her that I was on the railroad tracks, and when her son was murdered, I was there. I have since met Larry and Linda Ives and their private investigator, Keith Ronsaval. I gave them a statement outing everything that I knew about their sons and Don Henry's murders. In my statement, I named 3 local enforcement officers, 2 local attorneys, politicians, and a local bar owner.
That's kind of interesting. It does seem to match up. I mean, the attorneys, unless of course someone's feeding him this info. A local bar owner. Connection to the murdered witnesses there? Seems to be quite a lot of people involved in these drug drops. I mean, that's a lot of people.
As those being on the scene of the murders in 1987. I also named the criminal politician who directed the events at the scene via cell phone with one of the attorneys, politicians, and me. Your assistance by donating to the Kevin Ives and Don Henry GoFundMe account is greatly appreciated. By Larry, Linda Ives, me, Billy Jack Haynes. Please, if you've got it in your heart, I'm standing here putting my life on the line today, telling you that I could very well be killed. Open your pocketbooks, give money to this fund, because they have to be taken down.
What does everybody think? Is this guy genuine? Let's do another poll. Is Billy Jack Haynes being genuine here? See what all the MindShock listeners think. It's kind of hard to tell, but I don't see any outright deception that would be incredibly alarming, like I did with Harmon and his associates and law enforcement involved. So far, oh, we got somebody. 25% no, 75% yes. We got some haters here of Billy Jack. Or not, maybe not a hater, but somebody who thinks maybe drugs fried his brain too much, or someone put him up to do this. But, I mean, usually it'd be in the other direction if that were the case.
And Linda Ives, after 30 years, man, 30 years if your son was killed, you deserve some credit too, and you deserve some money coming your way so it can be investigated. Go to the GoFundMe page, please. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. That is his account here in this video. Now, if he was taken out after making this video, would that be too obvious? I mean, I don't know. They were kind of obvious with the other witnesses. Now, we do have some developments here. Billy Jack Haynes is accused of killing his wife in 2024 here. Wow. February 2024. I wonder if this is in connection with him blowing the whistle here. Now, he was hospitalized multiple times in 2013, 2014 is his WWE lawsuit. He's also part of a lawsuit with many other wrestlers. Okay, so the 2024 arrest, February 8th, 2024, Haynes was arrested following a 2-hour standoff with police after a shooting. Yeah, this case, and it just has so many twists and turns here. I mean, this truly is one of the most mind-shocking cases we've ever covered here. He was questioned by the police and is expected to be charged with the murder of his wife, Jeanette Becraft, who died by a gunshot wound. Becraft, who was 85 years old at the time of her death and suffering from dementia, was found dead in their home. According to Portland police, Haynes remains in police custody and is expected to be taken to jail following treatment for a medical condition unrelated to the homicide. All right, so this is kind of tough, because if they both have some kind of mental issues, I mean, who knows what they thought was going on versus what was really going on in any kind of type of fight with a gun. And, I mean, I don't know, this is a number of years now after he's blowing the whistle here. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's connected, unless there's some kind of development we don't know about, and that's connected to this. Unless that's the case. Now, there is a petition to release more documents. But that's what we have so far in this deep dive. I mean, yeah, there's a lot more to go over, so we are going to be doing another follow-up episode, of course. But I definitely know why this case was requested now. I hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the MindShock True Crime. Found it interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You could also be a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.